You're listening to a podcast from the BBC World Service. This is Hardtalk with me, Stephen Sacker. Thanks for downloading this edition of the programme. I do hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Hardtalk on the BBC World Service with me, Stephen Sacker. My guest today had no intention of becoming a public figure, but she found herself in the public eye as a result of personal tragedy. Catherine McCartney's brother, Robert, was murdered outside a Northern Irish pub a decade ago. It happened in a Republican stronghold of Belfast, and the evidence suggested members of the IRA were involved. Catherine and her four sisters began a campaign for justice, which has seen them confront deep-seated secrecy and hostility within their own community. No one has ever been convicted for the murder of Robert McCartney. Instead, the man suspected of ordering the killing was himself shot dead, and in turn, the suspected perpetrator of that murder was gunned down last August. The McCartney sisters and Northern Ireland's police chiefs say what has happened in the wake of the McCartney killing is evidence of the continued presence and power of the IRA in Republican communities in Northern Ireland. This despite the peace process and the formal disarmament of the paramilitaries. How could it be that one murder 10 years ago started a chain of events which threatens Northern Ireland's fragile peace? Well, Catherine McCartney joins me now. Welcome to Hardtalk.
Thank you.
The police service in Northern Ireland says that the IRA still exists, still has a presence inside Northern Ireland. Now, that is a message that you have been delivering for the best part of a decade. So do you today feel a sense of vindication?
Well, it's not vindication as such, a sense of relief, to be honest, that the reality is actually being taken on board at last by, firstly, the police, which I believe was a very positive step that they said that, and that now it is actually on the table. Because I believe the people did know, everyone knew that they hadn't gone away. We just needed officialdom to come out and say it, that they hadn't gone away.
And when you, and indeed I, talk about the IRA, what do you mean? Because, you know, in our minds, there's the idea of the Provisional IRA, the paramilitaries who were involved, are committed to a long-running war against the British presence in Northern Ireland, whose objective was to fight for and win a united Ireland. Is that the IRA you're talking about today?
That is, it's still the same IRA. In terms of its objectives, I wouldn't say that its purpose now is to pursue a British withdrawal. In terms of the political objectives, I would say that they have gone. Now, it's still the IRA.
So what is its objective today, in your view?
Well, from what I can gather over the past 10 years and their activity on the ground, which suggests that their objective really is to maintain that control that they had within communities, first and foremost. Well, the purpose of that would be, like any organisation wants to do that for self-interest and profit. So, to that degree, it could be classed as criminal, that the IRA today has just become nothing but a criminal gang. But that would be too simple an explanation also, because they are still very much the same people who were very politically motivated at one stage. And has that all left? I wouldn't think so.
Well, we will come back to that question of exactly what the IRA is, if indeed it still meaningfully exists today in Northern Ireland. But I want to take a step back now and to talk through your own personal story. I want to get a sense of the McCartneys, your family, the family you were raised in, you, your four sisters, your brother Robert. You were raised in a very nationalist, Republican, Catholic part of Belfast, Northern Ireland. Now, would you say that you were raised as a political family with an affiliation to republicanism? No,
not my parents weren't political. We didn't discuss politics at home or anything like that, but we did come from what is called a staunch, say, Republican area, would have been a stronghold of the IRA. Now, there's only 3,000 plus in this small area, so it's not an awful amount of people in it. but certainly the politics of it would be described as nationalist Republican.
Were you sympathetic to the IRA?
I would say the majority, yes, obviously.
You were personally?
I would have to say it would be easy to say now, in hindsight, you know, I was never sympathetic to the IRA, because my experience of growing up as a child in Northern Ireland at that time was one of conflict, and people in the area like the Church Strand said the enemy was very much the British Army and the police. It was not the IRA. And I always explain it that there was sort of like two-tier relationship with the IRA in communities like that. The community were tacitly supported the IRA because they regarded the IRA as the protectors against what was the British hostility to them as a community. In terms of the abstract notion of a united Ireland, I would say that most people in those communities were not tacitly supporting the Fallons for united Ireland. It was day-to-day what they saw, day-to-day survival against a hostile British state.
More about protection of a community.
Yes.
Okay, well look, to remind people the sequence of events, in the late 90s you had the Good Friday Agreement, you had a political breakthrough, and gradually over the following years you had the building up of a consensus around a political settlement in which the IRA eventually agreed to put down its weapons, so too the Protestant Unionist paramilitaries, and both the Republicans and the Unionists agreed to take part in a political process. But then, for you personally, in the midst of all this talk of peace, tragedy. Your brother was murdered outside a pub. Tell me how you learned about what happened.
Well, I learned about it the next day, and basically I got a phone call from an aunt to tell me that Robert was in hospital and that he had about an hour to live. At the time I was living about 30 miles outside of Belfast, so I had to travel up. By the time I got up, he had passed away. But the first thing my sister said to me was when I went in through the hospital doors was, the IRA did it. Now that was the first words she had said. She had been there for hours during the night.
But had she seen that incident inside and then outside the pub where your brother was eventually stabbed to death?
No. What had happened was the family had been told by the police, called to one of my older sister's houses to tell her Robert had been injured in a fight. So she then phoned the rest of the family. And when they went up to the hospital, to say the doctors were working on Robert until 8 o'clock the next morning. He was brought in around midnight, and right through to 8 o'clock there was still hope that he would survive it. But during the night, friends were coming in who had been in the pub, arrived up to the hospital, and were telling them what exactly had happened in the pub.
It is odd that you stressed that you figured out what had happened, and you were told, frankly, that the IRA had done it by people who'd been there at the time. Because what is strange about this whole story is that when the police investigation began, nobody would talk. There were more than 70 people inside that strongly nationalist pub who could have been witnesses, and all claimed they'd been in the toilet at the time it happened. Why, do you think?
Well, fear, obviously, because of who was involved. That can be the only explanation for so many people. Anybody can understand fear when something like that happens, of coming forward and giving information to the police, and you're dealing with very dangerous men. So you can understand people are very reluctant maybe to do that in normal circumstances. But then you bring in an organisation like the IRA on top of that. I mean, people are not going to sacrifice their own lives to give information, and especially not to give go into the dock against the IRA and point out members of the IRA. People won't do that.
Did the police, in your view, undertake a proper investigation, a full, thorough investigation of what happened?
In my view, no, they didn't. And it was very difficult at the time for us as a family, because on one hand you were arguing strongly for people to come forward, and you were trying to get Republicans not to intimidate witnesses, to try and let the information come forward to the police. And on the other hand, I always sort of suspected the politics that it was at the time. I could see that Robert's murder, because of the reaction to it even within the community, you know, the community, at the community level, people were disgusted at Robert's murder, and Republicans were starting to lose ground. So this is the timing of it was useful. So I always knew that they didn't cast their net very wide.
You and your sisters, you know, you got 4 sisters, you're all strong women, and you were all determined to try and fight for justice for your dead brother Robert. You undertook your own inquiries and your own investigations. How did that go down inside your own community, the community that you'd been raised in? Well,
initially, the community were very supportive of us initially, and we held a rally in the Short Strand. As I said, it's a very small area, and we held that within weeks. I think it was 2.5 weeks of Robert being murdered, and we held up placards that said enough is enough and who is next. And there was over 300 people, or maybe more at that, from the local area supporting us in that. We then held another vigil in April outside the bar, and by that stage a lot of those people had sort of backed off. It wasn't because they didn't support us, it was because a whispering campaign then had started up against the family. We then became an anti-Sinn Féin, anti-Republican. We were being used by the British. So when that started, that was sort of saying to people, if you align yourself to this family, you're coming up in conflict with us.
Yeah, because here you are facing the fundamental dilemma of a divided society. You're demanding truth and justice, and at the same time, people close to you, even friends, community leaders whom you've known all your lives, are beginning to see you as a traitor to your own side, your own tribe.
Yes, and for a family in that situation, when you're trying to fight for justice, you're cut off from using what normal politics would be, maybe lobbying unionists, for example, who in Northern Ireland then that would have been more visible proof that could be used against you. Even though in a democracy that should be a fairly legitimate thing to do, in Northern Ireland that becomes a weapon to diminish you and to say, you know, this isn't about justice, this is about them aligning with the enemy up against us, and they bring up obviously struggles of the communities up against the British. Then you have this person who's crossed the line. Did people say to your face and to your siblings' faces that you were a sellout, a traitor, disgusting? What did they say to you? Well, certainly we got letters through the post saying those type of things, and Paula actually, she got most of the letters came to her house because for some reason that's where, you know, all of the activity was centred on. There were bomb scares to Robert's fiance's house after he died. We were, you know, those sort of threats. There were things written on the walls, you know, about us being puppets. And even that's community level. When we went to America and met with Peter Keane, the congressman, he asked me outright, were we being influenced by the British? Now that's a congressman in America. So if that was his attitude, you can imagine it was quite easy to feed that line in to the community level. The thing is, your message to the outside world, indeed you took it to the White House, was that there was no justice for your family. But actually there was an attempt at justice for your family, because one individual was accused of the murder of your brother. There was a trial, but the law took its course and he was acquitted. But the fact is, the evidence had been tested. That was the law at work. Yes, Stephen, that's correct. And they would say the evidence that they put forward was tested. And my argument to that would be, I sat in that courtroom for 3 weeks, and in that case should never have been in that courtroom. A first-year law student could tell that case, the evidence against that man. And I said it when I came out of the court, that I would not have convicted him on that evidence. And I think for a member of the family to say that, it's very strong. In my view, it was, as I say, Robert's murder was used and capitalised upon to get the IRA to decommission. That was one of the big political goals. Now, what they needed to do was get the media to back off our case. So you charge someone, the media closes down, our campaign it comes into the background, and then you have this big announcement about decommission 2 months later after the charges were brought in June of 2005. The trial wasn't in 2008. By that time, it's left the public's mind. You talk of your sister Paula. Here's something Paula has said about her reflections on what's happened to your family. She says, Northern Ireland is a sick society. The tourists come here, they're told it's a nice, wee, normal place, but they better not look inside the sheds along the border or they'll find the dead bodies. It's a very dark view of where Northern Ireland is, even under this so-called era of peace. Do you share Paula's view? I do, and if she said that in 2005, if you go to 2007 and you have the murder of Paul Quinn, who unfortunately was in a shed along the border, that young man at the age of 21 was beaten with sticks so hard that every bone in his body was broken, and that was 2007. So from 1994, if you look at the figures from the ceasefire, there's been nearly over 40 men murdered in these circumstances by the IRA. Yeah, but that's nothing like the thousands who died during the worst times of the conflict. And also, it has to be said, as you've said in this interview, the fact is, for all of your condemnation of the IRA decommissioned its weapons. It was verified by an independent monitoring commission. And right now, today, Gerry Adams, the leader of Sinn Féin, says there is no such thing as the IRA. And all the allegations that swill around the place today that the IRA is still active, still has a presence, still has control, are in his view nothing but a political attack on Sinn Féin. Well, first of all, the fact that Jerry Adams has said that, I mean, that conflicts with what the police are saying. So we could go into the world of conspiracies that Jerry wants to put forward, and we could say that the police are also have made this up to make life difficult for Jerry Adams. Or you can look at the evidence on the streets, and you can look at the evidence of the men who are murdered by the IRA. So the IRA still exists. No, they don't exist anymore. I don't believe that the IRA is sitting around a table targeting cities for bombs and things like that, but they certainly exist.
So you say the IRA exists. There is no doubt that former members of the IRA exist. They're not all dead. We know that. But are you saying that they have a significant arsenal of weaponry, and that they still have a command structure with commanders at the top issuing orders?
I would say all of that still exists, yes. And I would also...
What's your evidence?
Well, first of all, if you listen to what's now being said in the political classes, no one ever told us that they ever went away. What they told us was that they went away for the purpose of military and political purposes. This is what they're now saying. We just forgot they asked the right question. Have they gone completely? Are they no longer exist? So the IMC are coming out, you know, let's look at the IMC. They didn't say
the Monitoring Commission.
Yeah, the ones who they also say that they did keep some weapons over. So everyone knew that they'd kept some weapons. Everyone knew that the IRA had gone away for military purposes and for political purposes, but no one said that they went away completely. The IRA said that they had left the stage, but they didn't say they'd left the theatre. So you're getting all this talk now that we all misread and misinterpreted what was said in 2005. So that's evidence itself.
So this is the context, that the idea you have that the IRA never went away. This is the context in which you see the extraordinary events of this year, which are connected to that case against, which involved your brother's murder in 2005. I'm thinking in particular of two murders. The murder first of Jock Davison, who you allege, was in a sense the mastermind of your brother's murder. Now, we can never know whether that's true or not, because the man was murdered himself earlier this year. A few months after that, the suspect, who in the community was seen as possibly the most likely suspect to have murdered Jock Davison, was himself gunned down, a man called Kevin McGuigan. That is when the police said they believed that this was connected to the continued existence of the IRA. It's quite a complicated story. But to you, does it represent in a sense, the vengeance taken against those who killed your brother? And did you feel, in a sense, it was retribution that you could welcome?
No. For me, the strange thing about Jock Davison's murder, and I've said it now for a few months, is that no one seems to know why Jock Davison was killed. There's quite a lot of theories going out there, and I've said it also that he had very many enemies. So there could be a list of people ready to take retribution. Kevin McGuigan's name wasn't in the mix because there was bad blood between them for many years. So he was a suspect. Retribution for Robert's murder in any sense, no. I don't think that it had anything at all to do with Robert's murder, because there's, first of all, I don't know who would take that retribution on part of our family.
Well, let me ask you, okay, maybe you don't see it as retribution. Was there a part of you that was happy when this man, Jock Davison, who you believe masterminded your brother's murder, was himself murdered?
Happy? No, I wouldn't say there was happy, but what I have said was that when Jock Davison was murdered, in a sense it was as if, in terms of pursuing Jock, that was over for us. But you can't pursue him anymore. You can't pursue him beyond the grave, right?
Did you see it as a form of rough justice?
No. It was a rough justice on someone's part, but not for Roberts. I mean, it didn't bring that sense of justice, because I wanted Jock Davison held to account for what he did to Robert, not what he's done to other people. In a sense, obviously you want him brought to account for what he's done generally, but there was no sense of justice in that was balancing the books in some way for Robert, no.
You, in this interview and elsewhere, have said that what disappoints you so much about the last 10 years is that the police and the politicians have consistently failed to even try to hold the IRA and its leaders, who still exist, to account. What strikes me as odd is that you yourself had one opportunity to play a small part in bringing at least a couple of alleged IRA chieftains to account, even this year, because two of them, they denied it, but two of them were charged with being members of an illegal organization, the IRA. You were called to be a witness because of things they had said to you back in 2005. And you backed out. You refused in the end to give evidence that might have brought a limited sense of justice against two alleged IRA figures. Why did you back out?
Now, you have to remember also, I was the one who initially made the complaint against the two.
Sure,
also.
but I'm asking you now, why you backed out?
Why did I back out? Because what I wanted is for them to be brought to, there was part of Robert's murder was there was murder itself, and then there was the cover-up. And I believe that the IRA were involved in the cover-up. I wanted the people who were involved in that Robert's cover-up. So these two men were the ones who, when we met with the IRA, who outlined their investigation to us. And during that investigation, they gave us very intimate details, which they claimed happened that night. And they told us what happened to the murder weapon, etc., etc. Okay? So what I wanted them was the police or the prosecution service to bring charges that would reflect the cover-up. I'm not interested merely in the fact that those two men were members of the IRA.
Because they deny that they were.
Well,
anyway.
They denied that they were. They said they weren't. And again, that's moved up to the courts.
So what you're saying is, at the moment, you have no faith in the system in Northern Ireland, which is interesting because right now there is a deep political crisis in your home because the unionist parties in the power-sharing arrangement say they're no longer prepared to work in that arrangement, particularly in the executive, alongside Sinn Féin, because Sinn Féin is covering up for this fact that the IRA, they say, is still a player in Northern Ireland. Do you support the unionists in their position?
Well, you see, for me, yes, it's a very difficult position for everyone because, first of all, I support the institutions and I would like to see it work. But you can't ignore, as I said, for 10 years I have been arguing that there was a policy of turning a blind eye to IRA criminality, which was the result of murders then taking place also. Because if the police pursued IRA people, then it might shake the Republicans up.
You know, you fought for 10 years against what you see the pervasive cover-up of the IRA's continued activities in Northern Ireland. Some of your siblings have talked about a sickness in your country which makes them want to leave, to emigrate, to forget Northern Ireland and its sickness forever. Are you committed to continuing the fight, or do you at times think, you know what, I have had enough of this, I just want to get out?
Well, sometimes I do think that, yes, I just want to get out. I don't know if the place will ever be the same, even if it works out. And I hope it works out for the people, everyone else, and for my children who live there and will have a future there. I hope it works out. But obviously, my experience I don't think there's anything we can do that will make me feel towards the place what I felt towards it before 2005 anyway. But I do wish it the best. I do hope it works. But I say, I don't think you can have it working with turning a blind eye to criminality. You cannot do that at all. It's the job of the police to pursue whoever it is committing crime, and that's all I want them to do.
Catherine McCartney, thank you for being on Hard Talk.
That was an edition of Hard Talk presented by me, Stephen Sacker. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.